It's time for the cocktail party.
It's always a really tough, hard-fought game. I think it'll be one of the most physical games we play all year.
This week on The Beat, we've got the latest on UGA's injury situation with some video from our boots on the ground. Plus, Mike Griffith sits down with the old ball coach to get his take on the Georgia-Florida rivalry. Yeah, let's go.
Giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Welcome into On the Beat, Cody Chaffins, Mike Griffith, and I think the music kind of fits. I'm kind of nervous this week, Mike.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a big game, and Florida's playing their best football of the year. Gators come rolling in with nothing to lose, and we see the Dogs coming off their best performance. Looks like we've got a dynamic matchup ahead, Cody.
I think it's what's coming up on this show that's got me all shaky a little bit. Second week in a row, we're going to have a college football Hall of Famer join us on the show, but it is the man that Georgia fans, for years and years, in this spooky season, this Halloween week, he was the man of their nightmares. It is Steve Spurrier, and I go back and I think of all these guys kind of through the years as a fan, the guys that you have to respect because they're really good at what they do, but you just can't like them because of the teams or the whatever they play for. So I think of like guys like Bryce Harper for a Braves fan. You have to respect him, right? Because he's really good, but you can't. It's just can't like him, right? And same guy, Tim Tebow, same thing. Steve Spurrier is on that list of guys you have to respect because of what they do. But man, you can't like them because all those things they've done to you over the years.
No doubt. He's a coach you love to hate. And, I've tried to explain that to Coach Spurrier. It's kind of lost on him. Well, I don't know. Did they really? It's like, yeah, Coach, you upset a lot of people over the years there, Coach, and he's, it's for him. It's just the sporting life and all in fun. And as we'll get into in the show, Coach, there was a little, method behind the madness to a lot of the things Coach would say after games.
Yeah, so Steve Spurrier going to join us on the show. Mike and him sit down for, a good 10, 15 minutes. We'll share that interview with you. Really interesting stuff. That's the one thing about him is that whether you love him, whether you hate him, he's really fascinating to listen to. And he obviously has great insight because of what he's done for all these years.
Well, I'll tell you, Cody, and just from a personal basis, and I'll go ahead and tell the story. Why not? It's a show that we do together. 1994, I did an interview with Steve Spurrier, and I was working for something called SEC Sports Weekly. And I called Coach Spurrier up, and I was doing an interview and asking him, well, what do you think makes you such a great coach? And he said, that's when he told me, which was an epiphany in my career, when he said there were two ways to be successful in life. And you can, work harder and longer like everyone else, or you can choose to do things different. And he said, I choose to do things different. And that inspired me in my career and really affected how I approached my job. And even to this day, and probably over the years, I must have gone up to Coach 2 or 3 times and introduced myself because I never covered the Gators. I always covered the other team. But I understood what Steve Spurrier had accomplished. So a few years ago, when the Football Writers Association was looking for a namesake for this first-year Coach of the Year award, I called up Coach Spurrier. He didn't have an award named after him, and I thought this would be perfect because of what he did at Duke, winning there. And then believe it or not, Florida had never won an SEC championship before Steve Spurrier was the head coach. And he went on to win, I think, 6 in 12 years. So what he did there was unprecedented, and you can still feel his presence there. And, he set the bar awful high for these coaches. The cool thing is he still lives right around there in Gainesville and really supports whoever is the head coach. And it's been some lean years, but I think you'll be able to tell that, even Coach Spurrier is excited about this game and the way the Gators are playing right now.
Yeah, let's move on to Georgia-Florida coming up this weekend. A few weeks ago, I may have felt differently about this game, but after the Kentucky game where Florida kind of showed out a little bit, showed who they could be, you really have to, and maybe that's a good thing for Georgia, right? You're not going to overlook this Florida team by any means. I'm going through some of the stats, like they outrushed Georgia. They score about the same amount of points. Georgia has 33 points per game. Florida 30.8. It's not a whole lot of difference. And as Kirby Smart has said all year, that gap is so small in the SEC, winning and losing on a Saturday.
Well, you saw that. You saw that when Mississippi State came into Sanford Stadium and played the Dogs within 10 and outscored them in the second half. And, of course, we've seen Vanderbilt. I mean, that's not a Cinderella story. I mean, that's a good football team. They just played Texas within 3. And I think Coach is going to try to give a prediction. And when he gives his prediction, that'll come to light. DJ Lagway, this freshman quarterback, this guy's the real deal. And you're seeing Billy Napier now, catching his wind. And we all thought a few weeks ago, Cody, that he might not even make it to this game. He might get fired. But all of a sudden, the Gators have found their stride with DJ Lagway, this freshman quarterback. And I think he was only 7 of 14 passing, but he averaged 37 yards of completion. And then they got this running back out of the state of Georgia who scored 5 touchdowns. So they've found a 235-pound runner. They've got this quarterback, and Kirby said today he has some wild throws and this incredible arm talent. Said he likes this guy's poise. Unlike a lot of freshmen, he doesn't come flying out of the pocket. He will step up and throw that ball. So he has a good pocket presence, and he's a good team guy. He does everything the right way. So, of course, Florida lost their senior starter, Graham Mertz, to injury in that Tennessee game. And Lagway goes out there in his first start and just rejuvenates the Florida offense. And the Gators, like you said, Cody, they're going to roll into Jacksonville. I don't know about expecting to win, but knowing they can win.
Yeah, you talk about Jaden Ball, that freshman running back, comes out of Columbia High School, Atlanta area, same high school as Nazir Stackhouse. Kirby Smart talked about him in his press conference, said, we had him on campus as a freshman. He was really impressed with him then. A team that can run the ball, can control the game, and keep it close.
Well, that's going to be big. And again, Georgia was actually his first offer, but I think they were looking at him as a defensive player there. Alabama was also looking at him as a defensive player. So it's not like Georgia just missed the boat. It's just this kid wanted to play running back and ended up at Florida through some connections that Napier had with him. One of his coaches was, I guess, part of one of Billy's Louisiana staff. So they had that little inside track. And, my question is, gosh, where's this guy been on the depth chart? But we know Trevor Etienne was there, and I guess Montrell was doing really well. Don't know about his health status, but the Gators do feel confident. They're playing their best football. They just beat Brock Vandegrift and the Wildcats by 4 touchdowns down there in Gainesville. They had a bye week. And Billy Napier, once his job kind of, went up for grabs, and, he started coaching a little different. He started not worrying so much about who's going to be there next year and maybe not being so careful. And, I don't think Kirby's ever really catered to anybody. I don't think that's ever affected Georgia just because of the talent level and the depth. But a lot of these other schools with this NIL and this free transfer, I think it hurt how some of these coaches were coaching. So now the Gators are going at it hard. They've got momentum. They've got confidence. And they got a rival coming into Jacksonville, a neutral site game, where we've seen some classics and we've seen the unexpected. So to your point, I do think it has Georgia's attention. Very clearly, Kirby Smart was dialed in. Chaz Chambliss and Arian Smith talked today. You could tell they're not overlooking this game. So I think you're right. I think it's good that Georgia saw how good Florida could be against Kentucky. And I think the Dogs realized that this is going to be a fight.
Now let's talk a little bit more about this Georgia-Florida game, but we're going to do it through the lens of our boots on the ground. So got a few things to get to as we share some of the video that I get to get on the sidelines. And one of the first things is Tate Ratledge did not play against Texas. Neither did Jordan Hall. But these are guys that have been working their way back. Pre-game, I took this video, and quite frankly, I thought they both could have played. Obviously, they've had now an extra week to get better. It looks like we could see Tate Ratledge in the lineup against Florida.
Oh, that'd be huge, and of course, Tate had that tightrope surgery after he suffered the injury, and, you get your best offensive lineman back. Now, Tate hasn't played in a game in a while, so you wonder how effective he'll be coming out of the gate. But one thing for sure, Georgia makes sure these guys are clear and capable. They don't want to risk injury. There's a long season still ahead of the Bulldogs, and these are 2 guys that you want to have for the stretch run once the Dogs get into the playoff. I mean, they're going to be playing 3 weeks into January, so very important that the snap counts are managed appropriately with how they feel and how they're doing. Like you said, you see Tate right there and all the power he brings to the offensive line. And then, Jordan Hall. I mean, what a big body. And you need those big guys in the center of the line of scrimmage. We've seen Nazir Stackhouse and how well he's playing. Brinson's gotten plugged back in now. We've seen some good things on the Georgia defensive front. Michael Williams, the guy everybody's talking about. And Kirby said today that he didn't even think he was 100% against Texas. So he thinks he's going to be even better. So this Georgia defensive line really coming to fruition. And just like all the Kirby teams, always seem to get better and play better the second half of the season. So that's one of the most exciting things about watching Georgia football.
Yeah, Hall will be fresh. And Kirby said Tate Ratledge is the game really important to him. So I'm sure he wants to go out there and have a good one. All right, our next boots on the ground is from that Texas game, and we can't show you the moving pictures, but we can show you some still pictures of the targeting calls, right? This is the Dan Jackson targeting call that got him suspended now for the first half. This is the Jonel Aguero hit. These are 2 hits called for targeting against Texas. My first instinct, standing on the sidelines when I saw these, was there was no helmet to helmet. The guys had their shoulders right there, but I thought they might get overturned. They were upheld. And again, Georgia going to be without a couple of key guys in their secondary to start this. But really interesting, Mike, what you found out this week about these targeting penalties.
Yeah, we were able to get an interview, a one-on-one with the National Director of Referees, Steve Shaw, and I thought he did a really good job explaining. One of the things that I learned is it's not about intent. How many times do we say, well, he didn't even mean to do that. He was just trying to make a tackle, and the offensive guy lowered his helmet. Well, it's not about intent. It's about what actually happens. So then where my mind went, Cody, is, well, if the offensive player lowers his head, why don't we see that as a targeting call? And Shaw explained, because the offensive player is not the one attacking. Typically, the offensive player is the one lowering their shoulder, trying to protect themselves or fall forward for extra yards. We understand that defenses by nature are attacking the ball carrier. And Shaw said, listen, all we want these guys to do is keep their eyes up. If you keep your eyes up, you're not going to get charged with targeting. And I thought that was a very good point that he made. And you could see in both cases, the Georgia players did drop their helmet, and for a target, there's a button right on top of the helmet, and there's a 6-inch radius that goes around it. And if that 6-inch radius strikes the neck or the head area, that's a target, right? If it's an attack, which obviously when you're trying to tackle it is, and if you have that top of your helmet hit that neck or head, it's going to be a target. And then he showed me some data. There was a 3-year study in the Pac-12 done, and they showed that on these calls that were called targeting, those plays had a 36 times more likelihood, not 36%, 36 times more likelihood of concussion. So this rule is doing what it's intended to do and minimize those very dangerous head injuries that, JT Daniels had his career ended, with multiple concussions, for example. And we've seen many other players that have suffered after effects. We see it in the NFL today. So I understand the rule. I think the thing that fans need to remember, or the thing that I learned, is it doesn't matter what the intent is. I think Lewis Seen had a pretty big hit on Kyle Pitts a few years back, and it was pretty clear Lewis wasn't necessarily trying to target, but when Pitts went down, there was the helmet to helmet. And it's all about the action and not the intent. The other thing, Cody, and I don't think we got video that, well, you did, because you actually got hit with one of these water bottles, was when Shaw talked about the crowd at Texas and how the call was changed. And I thought that was interesting, because we said, now, wait a minute, the game was stopped and this call was changed. By the letter of the rule, as long as the call is changed before the next snap, that's acceptable. And typically what happens is another referee comes over and says to the guy that made the call, hey, I had a better angle, or I saw this. And then they conference, and then it's up to the guy that threw the flag whether or not he wants to pick it up. Now, what made this a little different was because of that lengthy delay, 5 to 7 minutes, and that replay board showing it over and over, did it give those officials a little bit more time to review and really almost like a reversal, right? That's it. Pass interference isn't supposed to be a reversible call, right? That's not one that goes to instant replay. So was that a problem? And I asked Steve Shaw, I said, well, what about the fans throwing it? They can't do anything to the fans. They don't have the ability to throw a penalty on the fans. And back in the day, they would whistle them if they got too loud. But he said what they learned was when you called these penalties for too loud of a crowd, they got even louder. So it wasn't effective in crowd control. Now, game management is part of the flow of a game, and the conference office has control over them. That's why you saw the SEC issue that $250,000 fine, in addition to some other provisions as far as Texas reviewing their game operations and the threat, of pulling that alcohol license. And you better believe that will get the attention of these stadiums and these game operations. So clearly that was an issue in that game, and Georgia fans were upset, had a right to be. Texas did not represent themselves very well. They looked like a very spoiled program that was used to getting their way, and the first time something went against them, they threw the, this Texas tizzy, as I called it. And Georgia almost had to win that game twice because the momentum swung, scored a touchdown, got back within a score, and then the Dawgs responded with that incredible drive, that 11-play drive with the flea flicker and Trevor Etienne fourth down run. So Georgia almost had to win that game twice, but Shaw said, hey, here's the deal. And he wasn't commenting directly on that. I want to make that clear because the SEC issued a statement, but I asked him about a hypothetical situation. So he was kind of able to explain around it a little bit, and that is something that I do think that officials are aware of. And I think game management crews are aware of, because the SEC won't tolerate that. And you might see one of these programs lose their ability to sell alcohol if they're not able to effectively control their crowd. And we see more dangerous delays like that. Because as I said, I know you got hit with a water bottle. That probably wasn't a lot of fun, Cody.
No, and one thing, I think to Atlanta United, they make you take the caps off the bottle because they don't want stuff thrown on. That was a thing for me. It was a full water bottle with the cap screwed on. That thing is heavy. And so something to think about. But it's interesting that there is nothing you can do penalty-wise to the team, because it does feel like, at the least, if it's not unsportsmanlike, it's a delay of the game, right? And so really interesting stuff.
Here's the problem. How do you know it's one of the home crowd people? It could be a visitor that's trying to, get the home team in trouble. That's another part of the problem. Is I think there was a situation at a Georgia basketball game against Mississippi State one year where some beanbaggy got thrown on the floor during a free throw situation, and they did penalize the Georgia basketball team. And Tom Crane was going nuts saying, I don't even know if that was a Georgia fan that did that. So that makes it a little sticky and a little bit harder to interpret.
Yeah, and fair. So, yeah, it was a situation we hadn't seen, right? And so now I think the SEC will have things they want to do and ways they want to deal with it moving forward. The penalties, the targeting, I do think it's interesting. I would love to see one or two thrown out there on an offensive player just to kind of keep that in their mind, because it does seem like, he could say they're protecting themselves or whatever. There are some guys out there using that thing as a weapon. So I think that's something, maybe that's the offseason, one of those talking points and points of emphasis moving forward that could happen maybe next year, because, it really does seem like sometimes the guys' hands are tied when you've got somebody coming at you like that.
Well, Shaw did mention, Kirby is on that rules committee, so he's been in the room, and it has not been a point of emphasis. You may see that change. Now, when you do see it called on offensive players, it's often on those crackback blocks, because that's when you have the defenseless player. That's another thing. It's hard for a defender to be considered defenseless when he's the one initiating the contact. So he did bring up a situation he saw a couple of years back where a big tight end caught the ball and was running towards the goal line, could have easily scored, but he beelined for the safety just so he could lower that crown into him and try to deliver a shot. So it does happen. It's very rare. The other thing I would say that he brought up, you don't see a lot of these overturned. There is an appeals process. The team has to send it in by Monday. Shaw's the guy that reviews it. He turns it over that same day. And if a guy's going to play, he lets the opposition know, as well as the team that had the player accused the infraction. I think he said only 3 out of 21 that were sent in with games that had replay got overturned because the play had already been reviewed. So it's almost like a secondary appeal in the games that are televised.
And Kirby didn't want to talk about that today, so that kind of makes me assume that that's not going to get turned over. And Georgia will be without Dan Jackson and Janelle Aguero in the first half against Florida. All right, let's do another warm and fuzzy one from our Dog Bowl last week. It was the off week, but my boots were on the ground. I was still shooting Georgia football players. How about Chris Cole, 5-star freshman linebacker? And I just love the way he was interacting with these kids, because for a couple of reasons. One, it can be tough for teenagers to interact with little kids. Like, it can just be awkward for teenagers. But he was right in there with those kids, having such a great time. And the other part of it is Chris Cole is now playing a bigger and bigger role. He can start feeling a little good about himself, right? Because Kirby Smart's talking about him good in press conferences. He's doing really nice things on the football field. Couple tackles against Texas, playing a bigger role with Smile Munden out. But look at him, boots on the ground, caught him, just hanging out. He wasn't doing that for the cameras. He was just hanging out with these kids. I loved that moment at the Dog Bowl.
Well, I think it was great. It's great to see these players in this element. So much of the national press is over, this or that off the field issue. But to see I think 60 Georgia players come out, Carson Beck among them, out there bowling for a good cause and just enjoying the camaraderie. A lot of Georgia fans that, love and support Coach Richt and his cause for Parkinson's and Crohn's research. And, of course, at DawgNation, we're very proud to be associated with that. You did a heck of a video on that, and we got a mic'd up version of Mark Richt. I talked with Mark the other day. He just loved it. This was his vision when he came to DawgNation, and the fact that, the work you and Jay Black have done behind all the production. And of course, Brandon Adams was out there and Kaylee Manziel doing the interviews. I think this has become part of the vision that Mark had for this research. But also, I think Kirby Smart recognizes how healthy this is for his team during the bye week to spend this time together and have this sort of camaraderie. We got Warren Brinson, wanting to win that second belt, and he gives a belt to the winner. And Coach Richt let slip with me. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell it, but I'm going to share it. He's going to have a trophy for the high Georgia football player, because right now it goes to the highest individual of anybody, and their sponsors bring in these. I don't know. Maybe they're not ringers, but maybe they are. I don't know. But he says there's going to be a Bulldog player that's going to have a big old trophy next year, and they'll have the bragging rights on the team for the top dog bowler at the Chick-fil-A Rick Dog Bowl.
Yeah, one of the other things, too, kind of saw the video with Chris Cole there, and that was a whole charity event, the Dog Bowl, but they also brought in extra special people, and Georgia put out a video. Those were closed to our cameras, but they did a video with, they always welcome in the extra special people group and got to spend time with them. And you talk about, just really cool to see the other side. These guys, they can fire at somebody on the field, but they also have pretty warm hearts, too, and that's a cool thing to see. All right.
Yeah, it really is. A lot of fun there. A lot of fun, Cody.
All right, let's do Mike's 30,000-foot view. We still got Steve Spurrier on the way. Well, Mike, it was the game Saturday night everybody had their eyes on, and all of a sudden, Texas A&M is the team to beat in the SEC.
Wow, LSU and Texas A&M were the last two unbeatens in the league. I wouldn't have picked that at the beginning of the year, but there was LSU and Old Nussmeier, and they're just controlling the action there in College Station. It's 17-7 at halftime, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm remembering back to the Georgia-Clemson game and something that I was told, how Kirby likes to wait until halftime to make these adjustments because he doesn't want the other team to know what he's got up his sleeve, because if they know it before halftime, they got time to adjust. So I'm thinking A&M's got to have something up their sleeve. Elko's got to have something. They've been playing such good ball. And sure enough, A&M came out and threw some different pressure packages at Nussmeier. I believe they intercepted him 3 times, outscored LSU 31-6, and brought in Marcel Reed, a dual threat quarterback. And he only threw 2 passes, but he completed both of them for 70 yards. Meanwhile, ran 9 times for 62 yards and 3 touchdowns. And we heard Brian Kelly say, if I was playing against this, I'd run the quarterback too. So A&M right now looks really good. They're playing really good football. They've got some momentum. We'll be paying attention when they play Texas in the final game of the season. That could be a play-in for the SEC championship game. Of course, Georgia, they still have their work cut out for them. Nobody's going to look past Florida, but we all know that Ole Miss, a trip to Ole Miss is on the schedule, and so is a home game with one-loss Tennessee, so maybe Georgia-Tennessee, another play-in game for the SEC championship. We're not even talking about the 12-team playoff. I mean, those scenarios are all out there. Teams with 2 losses, Alabama, still fighting for a spot in the 12-team playoff. So the SEC, to me, it's been a fascinating year. We saw old Sam Pittman and the Hogs. Boy, they got rolling. They got a big win. Poor Mississippi State. They can't seem to catch a break. They play all these hot teams, but you just never know what's going to happen in the SEC from week to week. A lot of good football being played, but to your point, Cody, that A&M LSU game, it felt like we were watching a playoff game. It looked like whoever won that game was really going to be in position to control their destiny. And right now, it's the Aggies that are the last undefeated team in the SEC.
Really cool atmosphere there. One day we'll get to go to Kyle Field, right? Who knows if that'll ever actually get on the schedule for Georgia people. Well, we know they will travel if that is the case. A lot of fun there. All right, time now for something really special here on DawgNation, and it's you may be hate watching on the beat today for this reason, but really interesting, fascinating stuff always when we get a college football Hall of Famer. The old ball coach, Mike Griffith, sits down with Steve Spurrier.
Well, we welcome Coach Spurrier to the program, and Coach, we really appreciate you joining us here on DawgNation. It's obviously a really big week for Georgia and Florida, and a big game for Kirby Smart. Believe it or not, this is his 9th year already, and they're coming off a big win over Texas. And of course, you and I visited a little bit over that. First, I want to ask you, you've gotten to know Kirby a little bit at some of these golf outings, I believe. What's that relationship like between 2 visored coaches?
Yeah, I've known Kirby a little bit over the years. He's played in the Peach Bowl tournament at Reynolds Plantation.
Okay.
And I guess it was last year or so, they paired us together. And Kirby, right after he won the national championship. So was that last year or 2 years ago?
I guess it was 2022, I guess.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah, they seem to run together real fast. But we played decent. We didn't make enough putts and we could have played a little bit better. I think we finished fifth or sixth, fourth, fifth, sixth, something like that.
Yeah. So does football come up when you guys are together? I mean, you coached against Kirby. Obviously, Florida had a lot of success. Kirby got a couple picks on you in that one game. I guess it was it 97 they got you when Kirby had a couple picks. Do those games ever come up? Y'all ever talk about football?
Are you talking about that one game they beat Florida? No, we didn't talk about that. In fact, we didn't talk really about much football, to tell you the truth. When you're on the golf course and you're competing, we're trying to make a bunch of birdies if we could and trying to win the dang thing. But we took a picture afterwards and so forth. And I think I had one with my wife and his wife also.
That's pretty cool. Well, I think the Gators might have won 4 SEC championships in a row during one stretch. And now Kirby, I think he put together 3 undefeated season and back-to-back titles. When we talk about an SEC Mount Rushmore, of course, a lot of people bring your name up and Nick Saban. Do you think Kirby Smart, with his back-to-back titles in today's game, is he a guy that we ought to look to maybe someday to be a part of something like that in the College Football Hall of Fame?
Oh, certainly. Certainly. I think he's the winningest coach in the nation right now, isn't he? Over the past 5-7 years, something like that. So I'd say he's done pretty well there with the Georgia Bulldogs.
And as far as the Georgia formula, and you've watched Kirby over the years and you see how they win games, and obviously Florida's not running the fun and gun anymore, but what is Kirby, do you think, doing that's making him an effective football coach?
Oh, I think the best thing he does is have his guys prepared to play week after week. When you're winning a lot, you got to fight being a little complacent. And the Bulldogs don't seem to ever be too complacent. They come to the ballpark ready to play. They probably had a little bit of a downer against Kentucky, but they still won the game. And that's you're going to have a little down games every now and then. But, they're in position to win everything. Just got to keep winning. And hopefully our Gators, though, will have a good game this week. The Tennessee game, gosh, Florida could have won that so many times. When you're inside the 24 times and come away with 3 points, it's hard to win. And we lost in overtime. So the Gators have a pretty good team. We just got to, play like we're a good team, and certainly we'll have a chance this Saturday.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Coach Napier was in a pretty tough situation. I believe all 3 of their losses came to teams in the top 10 or something like that. And it started out a little slow. But during the bye week, it looked like Coach Napier kind of shifted into another gear. Things going a little different there. What have you seen transpire there in Gainesville?
Yeah, he did say that they had some different type practices, a little more physical, a little more. I think coaches are yelling and screaming a little bit more, to tell you the truth. Yeah. And that's what you got to do. And I saw where Hugh Freeze the other day said, sometimes with this NIL and transfer portal, you don't want the guys to get mad at you and leave. But he said, I got to start yelling and screaming because we're going to keep losing. And he had a big win this week up at Kentucky. So, you got to coach him hard. And I think Kirby does that as good as anybody.
Yeah, I'd ask you, I believe it was 12 or 13 years ago. I think you actually suggested players be paid. And at the time, oh, my gosh, Steve Spurrier believes players deserve a little bit of money. That was a really big deal that you said that. How would you manage it? I mean, it does look like a different game now. Would you change anything? Would you have to tailor things a little bit differently with this NIL and portal?
Oh, certainly. If I were coaching today, I'd try to do it the way most all these teams are doing it. I know Dabo doesn't like to pay guys much of anything, or if he does at all, I'm not sure. But, you got to keep up with the rest of the competition. But I think you got to balance it. And I think Georgia does as good a job of balancing how they pay the players. In my opinion, you can't have one quarterback making $1 or $2 million and the other guy's only making 10 or 15 grand. And especially if your quarterback's not playing very well. And that occurs at some places that have gone bad recently. So to me, you got to balance it out. And that's just the way it is right now. And hopefully keep everybody happy. and have a lot of good players and good coaches and go try to win it all.
Remember a few years ago, you were telling me how good you thought Anthony Richardson was, and the Indianapolis Colts clearly agreed with you. He's starting in the NFL, and now we're seeing DJ Lagway, and I mean, this kid completed, I think, 7 passes for 230. I think he averaged 37 yards a pass or so. I've never seen anything like it. Is Lagway similar to Richardson? What are your thoughts on DJ Lagway and what he brings to the Gators right now?
No, I think they're a little bit different. First of all, Lagway is well respected by his teammates, being just a freshman. I mean, he says all the right things. Graham Mertz got hurt, and so that now DJ is the quarterback. But he was always very complimentary of Graham Mertz and what a good leader and how he's helped him become the quarterback he is today. But I think he's an excellent passer, throws the deep ball very well. He can run a bit, and Anthony Richardson might have been a little bigger, stronger runner. But DJ throwing the ball and handling it, this, that, and the other, he's a talented player. It's going to be fun watching him, hopefully the next 3 years also.
Yeah, I don't know about. I was going to say, Coach, I don't know about maybe a couple more. He looks like an awful good one. I want to shift gears. We had a chance to catch up at your award. Every year we do the Steve Spurrier First Year Coach of the Year award and pick some pretty good ones. Beamer and Heupel seem to be having success, and Chadwell at Liberty, of course. But last year, a couple years ago, we introduced the Legend Award, and Bobby Stoops won it the first year. And last year, you brought Coach Richt down there, and you guys got to share some time together. It was kind of interesting for me to watch you two interact, especially when he told you that you cut him one time. You didn't even realize you'd cut him from a USFL. What was that moment like?
Yeah, that was something. Yeah, Mark Richt and I go back when he was at FSU. And certainly the teams they had there were, top 4 in the nation, I think 13 straight years. But anyway, Mark tried out with the Bandits, USFL Tampa Bay Bandits. And we had John Reeves from Florida, Jimmy Jordan from FSU, and 1 or 2 other guys there. But it was open for walk-ons. And Mark said, I was there and you cut me. And I said, well, you must not have impressed me very much. Heck, he was in Miami when they had, Testaverde and Jim Kelly and all those guys. So he didn't get to play much in college. He should have transferred is what he could have done. But he certainly had an excellent coaching career. And I was with him last Saturday night. We were at Duke University. We have a reunion for the 89 ACC champ team that I coached back then. And of course, they had a big game with Duke playing SMU. So it was the ACC TV game. So Mark and the other TV personalities there with the ACC network were there. They had me on before the game. So always good to see Mark. He's a class guy.
Yeah, it's pretty classy. I think the team that won it turned it over like 6 times, he was telling me. I can't believe it.
They turned it over 6 times, and Duke, our team, missed 3 sort of short field goals. Guy kept hooking the ball left. But it went into overtime, and SMU kicked it. Duke scored, went for 2 and missed. So everybody says you got to go for 2. No, if you go for 2 and make it, that's smart. If you go for 2 and don't, you're a dummy. So I don't know how you're supposed to justify that, really.
Coach, I got to ask you, one of the fun things I think a lot of fans always enjoyed your post games. You seem to like to have a little bit of fun, but you told me that was always kind of in a bit of a sporting way. When we think about rivalries, how did you manage that? I mean, you knew everybody wanted to get a piece of. You knew they got tired of losing games to you, and yet you still had fun with it. Did you have an approach or a psychology to that?
I don't think so. I think one thing I wanted to do was definitely try to be different. There's 2 ways to be successful in life: do it like everybody else, try to outwork them, or get more better players than everybody else, or else try to do it a little differently. So I figured my best chance was to try to be a little different, this, that, and the other. But I read a lot of books on some of the great coaches, John Wooden, Vince Lombardi, or a lot of their motivational stuff. And so I tried to implement that a little bit. And one thing I think Coach Wooden said, he said, you don't even have to look at the scoreboard. Just tell your players to play the entire game. And as coaches, we'll run the ball or kill the clock if we have to, something like that. But you don't worry about the score so much. And if you get way ahead, you let your other players play. And, they want to play too. They want to try to score a touchdown. So I always thought if you could win big, that's a little bit better than barely winning. And people will maybe look at you that, man, they're a really good team if you win big. If you win a bunch of close ones, the other team might say, man, we could beat these guys. They've just barely been winning. I don't know, but it does build confidence, I think, if you're able to win by 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Now, there's an old story, and you and I talked about it earlier this year at the awards show down there at your restaurant. You got that Spurrier's Gridiron Grill where you do all sorts of outings. I know Florida recruits there. You got all your visors and trophies and whatnot. And it was something about scoring 50 between the hedges. But you told me that somebody actually came to you with that idea on the way to the stadium. That wasn't original. That wasn't an original.
Yeah, Lawson Holland. Lawson went to Clemson, and so he wanted to beat the Bulldogs almost as bad as the Gators, I guess. I don't know. But we were on the bus, and he come over and said, Coach, no one's ever scored 50 points between the hedges. I said, Lawson, let's just worry about trying to win the dang game. So we get down there, we got 45, and we got the backups in the game, and he came over and mentioned that again. No one ever scored 50. So we threw a couple of passes, but it was within, a minute still of the game. We didn't call timeout and fired at the end zone. But we did score 50 between the hedges, so something different. I don't think they got mad at us because we beat them the next year also.
Yeah, I don't think so. Now, what was unique?
Listen, getting mad at people does not help you win. You got to out-prepare them and play better than them. That's how you win.
Something tells me that might have been part of the psychology. A lot of those teams were pretty fired up, maybe more fired up than they should have been when they played the Gators instead of focusing on the game plan. But something unique about that was the Jacksonville Gator Bowl was under construction, and so they played a home and home. And, of course, that's going to be the case here again in a couple of years where they're building this new $104 billion or $4 billion stadium. So they're going to have to play the game at different sites. And there's been some talk of, well, should they go home and home or should they go Atlanta and Orlando? Do you have a thought or a feel on that?
Well, financially, they probably ought to go Atlanta and Orlando. If I was coaching, I'd like to go home and home with them probably. But I think money talks and everything else walks nowadays. So I got a feeling it'll be Atlanta and maybe Orlando.
Yeah, NIL deals. One of the things you do now as we look at the first-year coaches is evaluate these first-year coaches on a game-to-game basis. What is a guy like Kalen DeBoer going through? I mean, he's taken over for Nick Saban at a school that's used to winning all the time. He's obviously a good offensive coach. I mean, what are your thoughts on Coach DeBoer? Obviously, the guy can coach some offense.
Yeah, I think Kalen had a wake-up call at Vanderbilt. And then, of course, he lost another one. But the big win over Georgia, everything was, he was on top of the world. Then you lose a couple, and who is this guy we got? So I think he started yelling at his guys a little bit last week because they came out and really played and clobbered Missouri. So I think he maybe has been a little too nice and started being a little bit more vocal with his team because they certainly acted like they were ready to play last week.
Yeah, everybody's bearing down. So I guess before I let you go, I mean, it's a wide open landscape. I mean, it looks like the Oregon Ducks look like they're playing good. A&M looks pretty good. You got any thoughts on how things are shaking out or any teams you're going to be keeping an eye out for outside of the cocktail party next week?
Well, obviously Texas A&M has been probably the best in the SEC right now. So Coach Elko from Duke, he won at Duke. So if he can win there, you ought to be able to win in the SEC with those players he's got there. So anyway, but there's still so much ball left. Anybody can win it. And really, a lot of these teams are so close. It's who makes or misses a field goal or who drops a pass or hits a pass. I mean, so many teams can win nowadays.
Do you ever, I got to ask you this, since you just mentioned Elko in the playoff. I mean, are there any times when you let your mind wander a bit? Like you said, you ran into Florida State when every year they're top 4 and it was the end of the year and only 2 teams made it. You ever wonder, or would you have liked to have been a part of this 4 or 12 team playoff? Do you like what this is doing for college ball?
Yeah, well, certainly it is more like professional ball. A bunch of teams make the playoffs, and you go from there. I always thought we should have 8. That was mine. I thought 8 teams certainly looked like maybe they would have a chance to win in the playoff. 12, I don't know, those last 4 that make it. Maybe they can, though. Maybe they can. But still, the SEC, there's so many top 10 teams in the SEC. Certainly, maybe 2 or 3 or 4, I don't know, could make it. But I still don't think some of the really good teams will make it, whereas the other ones, because of the way they're doing the seeding, has to get in. So they have to spread it out around the country, conference champs and all that. And but time will tell. This is first year of it, and I think everybody's going to like it, though, to tell you the truth.
No doubt about it. Well, Coach, I appreciate all the time today. I know you're looking forward to the game next week. I think a lot of folks certainly watching are, and I know we all appreciate what you've done for college football. Tremendous success, and I enjoy being a part of the Coach Spurrier Award. It's always fun to bring a first-year coach down there, and the freshman All-Americans in this Legend Award. We're hunting our legend right now, so it'll be interesting to see who we end up with in February down there in Gainesville.
I'm going to tell you who's going to win the Florida-Georgia game right now. The team that plays and coaches the best. I think it's pretty even talent-wise. I really do. I mean, Georgia's outstanding. But, our 3 losses, Tennessee, Miami, Texas, A&M, they're 19-2. Do you know that?
Yeah.
So if we'd had maybe Akron and Chattanooga or something like that, gosh, we could come into this thing 6-1, 7-1, something like that. So I think it's going to be a heck of a ball game. Really do.
A lot of confidence.
Team that plays the best will win. Simple as that.
I think it'll come down to that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Coach, again, thank you so much. We appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you again pretty soon here.
Okay. See you, Mike.
You got it. Coach Steve Spurrier, Hall of Famer, old ball coach, still sharp as a tack. Appreciate it. Cody, back to you.
Whoever plays the best. Kind of sounds like a political answer from Steve Spurrier right there. All right, time for a break here on The Beat. When we come back, it's our Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing Who's Hot and Who's Cold segment.
I'm so glad you're here.
Let's take a look.
Anytime can handle all your HVAC and plumbing needs, providing top quality service for a reasonable price.
All fixed now.
Can we call you again?
Yes, anytime. Any day? Yes, anytime.
But for the heat?
Yes, anytime. For the toilet? Yes, anytime. Anytime you have a problem, just call.
Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Large enough to handle your HVAC needs, but small enough to care.
All right, welcome back to On the Beat. Cody Chaffins and Mike Griffith with you. It's time for our Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing Who's Hot and Who's Cold segment. Mike, we'll start with you. Who is hot this week?
Boy, I don't know how it could be the Texas A&M Aggies. They sure look good in the second half, just dominant against LSU. And, of course, the Aggies, we mentioned a little bit ago, they're going to end up playing Texas in the last regular season game in College Station. But this week, they're going to travel to play South Carolina. And you just never know about those Gamecocks. Now, they threw a heck of a scare into Alabama and Tuscaloosa. And, Shane Beamer's got some big wins against top teams. But I don't know how this one's going to go. But right now, it is a red-hot Texas A&M team that's going to go rolling into South Carolina for a 7:30 game on ABC. We talked about DJ Lagway a second ago, and this kid is hot. Let me tell you, this kid averaged 37 yards of completion, was not sacked. He's got the Gators believing they think they can win this football game. He is also on the hot list. I think the Georgia Bulldogs are still hot. I was impressed with Kirby's presentation today. I was impressed with the guys at the bowling alley, how upbeat they were and how they embraced the charity event. That's always hot to see. But just to hear Arian Smith and Chaz Chambliss talk about this football game and how much it would mean to them, Cody, to be able to leave Georgia and say as a part of that senior class that they never lost to the Gators, something that hasn't happened for a Georgia team since the 1980s. So you got to say, these Dogs are rolling in there red hot into Jacksonville in the cocktail party next week.
And I'm thinking about Jacksonville. I'm thinking it's just going to be hot down there. It always seems to be about 10 degrees hotter than what we were experiencing. I think it temps in the 80s next week. It's always so hot down on the field. So I'll be down there, boots on the ground, but it'll be hot down in Jacksonville. I'm so excited for all these Dog people to get down there to Jekyll Island or St. Simons or wherever they are, get their condos for the weekend like Larry Munson used to say. It's going to be a great time down in Jacksonville this week. All right, who is cold, Mike?
Wow. Right now, you got to say poor Mississippi State. And, at least Mississippi State gets to play UMass. I don't know if anybody's going to be watching, but boy, Mississippi State cannot catch a break, struggling to try to win an SEC football game. I look at the Auburn Tigers, and they've got Vanderbilt at home. I mean, is Hugh Freeze, is he still cold? If he loses this game to Vanderbilt at home, I'd say he's going to be freezing cold. So that's going to be a freeze warning. Unfortunately for the Brock Vandagriff fans, I got to say the Kentucky Wildcats are pretty cold. They just lost by 4 touchdowns to the Florida Gators. They got to travel and play Tennessee this weekend. Right now, Mark Stoops goes from maybe being the A&M head coach to a very disappointing season. Kentucky Wildcats, cold as ice.
Yeah, that was one that was on my mind as well. You lose to Auburn last week, and they felt so good, after the Georgia game, and then they go get the big win, and it's just not quite what it was. All right, so Mike, I'll let you get on your soapbox here. Are you still anti-Jacksonville?
Now that they're going to go to this new stadium, and I believe it's $1.4 billion, I think it's a no-brainer, right? It's the money that matters so much. These schools have to find ways to generate revenue. We've seen Georgia Tech now moving their games to Mercedes-Benz Stadium so they can get a bigger paycheck. So that's more NIL money. I think now it makes sense now when you're going to a brand new stadium that's going to have a lot of luxury suites, a lot of amenities, where they're going to be able to charge more money and be able to make more money off of that game. So that's going to give Georgia and Florida those extra dollars that they need to try to compete for great coaches and try to compete for great players. So it makes more sense to me now. I still think it's tough for the Dogs to have to fly down there, and the Gators get to bus, and you wonder how that works out with visits. You can't really have a recruiting weekend, because part of a recruiting weekend is going to the facilities and spending time with the team, and you can't really do that there. The team is in and out, and the game operations are such, they don't really get a feel for the Athens campus. But, my goodness, they can just drive an hour away and be on the Florida campus. So I just feel like that puts the Dogs at a recruiting disadvantage. And then, I've been one, as much as I love Sanford Stadium, it hurts me that there hasn't been a lot of really great home schedules. Now, that's going to change next year, Cody. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Are there going to be some teams coming to Sanford Stadium between the edges, and some talks between the SEC and the Big Ten about maybe some potential scheduling down the line? So I've warmed up a lot to that. I understand it. It is a special game for so many people. I do think it has been to Georgia's detriment in the past. But moving forward, I think this game makes a lot more sense now that you're going to have a much, much, much better facility. And from what I understand, you're going to have a really good infrastructure around there. I feel like the current site has kind of slid in recent years and not really what it used to be. So moving forward, I'm in. I understand it. I'm seeing a Sanford Stadium that's getting built up. And now that extra money, now that we know it's going to be going for players and coaches, if you're the Georgia Bulldogs, now you're recruiting against everybody. I mean, Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks got Nike money. Ohio State prints the money up there, so is University of Michigan. You're trying to beat these guys for players in an era where everybody's a free agent after every season. So now, Cody, I'm all in on Jacksonville moving forward.
I love to hear that. Yeah, I think definitely it's almost become a selling point now. You get to go – now you can tell kids you're playing in an NFL stadium. Let's be honest, it doesn't feel like that when you get down there. But if you're in one of these new state-of-the-art NFL stadiums, that can be a recruiting advantage as well. And, yeah, that money talks, doesn't it? So if you know that trip's going to also bring in, maybe another 5-star, then it certainly seems worth it. That's going to do it for On the Beat this week. We want to thank Steve Spurrier for coming into DawgNation, enemy territory for the old ball coach, but we appreciate having him on the show. We got a lot more coming up next week. Who knows? We maybe get another college football Hall of Famer. We'll have to see. But that's going to do it for Mike Griffith. I'm Cody Chaffins. We'll see you next week.